Jediam bonyamie yasra usebo yose ye jediam bonyamie yasra usebo yose yedia to yedo asasa suma fata krotia mansa pabrafo na yewo amampinie na se tufa na mapreno ebrade ni ebebo se yose yedia to yedo asasa suma fata krotia mansa pabrafo na yewo amampinie na se tufa na mapreno ebrade ni ebebo se yose yose
We are observing the entry of the pregnancy of the second assisting occupants of the boarding school, that's Asantehene. In 1995, the museum was closed, rehabilitated, and reopened to the public as part of activities marking the Silver Jubilee celebrations of Otufo Opokuwari II. Virtually 29 years today, we have gathered here again for another grand reopening of the Manhyia Palace Museum to the public as part of activities marking the Silver Jubilee celebration of His Majesty Otufo Osei-Tutu II. An honor and a privilege to be part of this history. A round of applause for yourself.
Well over almost 3 decades of leadership, leading the people of Asantehene, an astute lawyer, the Vice President of the Ashanti Regional House of Chiefs, and the Paramount Chief of Asantehene, indeed the occupant of the silver stool. Another round of applause.
A very good morning. A very good morning to all our distinguished guests and visitors who are gathered here now. I'm waiting for your response. Especially the members of our diplomatic corps and our distinguished guests who have been able to fly and join us over here. All this signifies that the respect, the basic respect that the diplomatic mission, and through them, our former overlords, of course led by the British and some of the European representatives of great museums who are gathered and come over here. It shows the astute respect you are called our illustrious Majesty and King Otufo II. Thank you for coming. My Royal Majesty Otufo, in consonance with your directives, or perhaps may I term it as orders, I deem it the greatest pleasure of mine to humbly accept your orders to play the role of chairman for today's esteemed function. My gracious Majesty, I humbly, dutifully accept to chair today's function. And it's not a small function, it is no mean function. It is because for over 200 years ago, our illustrious kingship as a royalty, the royalty regalia. I don't want to use the terminology stolen as a sign of respect of my diplomats behind me over here, but rather 200 years ago, royalty regalia that got missing. My gracious Majesty, today is an auspicious day. So once again, I dutifully accept to serve as the chairman of this auspicious occasion. And fortunately for me, my astute son, whom we in Mampong, Butasi royalty, term as Sir Ivo, my own departed brother, one of his sons. And I'm happy to note that Ivo has followed the footsteps of my brother, who is departed to join our ancestors. He has been able to put down some notes, I would deem it as notes very well, to guide me of what I should outline this very afternoon. Because I must confess, I hesitate to take the wings out of the sail of our illustrious Platoon Force major summary that we all anticipate at the end of the program. I really hesitate, so I restrict myself and follow the outline aid memoir that my own astute and learned son has been able to put down for me. So once again, with the illustrious permission of my Majesty, I proceed, sir. Today is what is obviously one of the momentous memorials of Asante in the last 200 years. One of these will be why, the reasons why we are with you this afternoon, Your Majesty, what you initiated, the negotiations in May 2023, which has taken less than a year to bear fruits. It had been tried several times before in the last 50 years, but all to no avail. These objects of the Anglo-Asante Wars, particularly those of 1874, have finally come home. That is why I hinted that I hesitate to say stolen items. Regalia of kingship and royalty have come back home. 100 years ago, your illustrious grandfather, Ajima Purple I, made that ultimate sacrifice to save Asantes from total destruction, so that you and I can now speak to the people who love their kingdom and culture. And all this has resulted in less royalties who can claim boldly as we constitute the great ancestors of our forefathers, spearheaded by your own esteemed grandfather, who did not resist at a great cost and a great price, say, deporting you to a foreign land. They agreed and graciously allowed the British to take us first to Cape Coast and then to another island, the name had just slipped me, then finally to where he ended up. But graciously as God permits, we were able, the British, to rescind their decision. And here you are, it was brought home. And we, the Asantes, at that time, we have astutely ancestors, astutely decided, irrespective of what the British term as the return of, pardon my language, ordinary Kwakudia, a Manhyia of Kumasi. We looked at their faces. We did not respond. We did not argue. We did not pray. But in our innermost hearts and brains, we knew that our own illustrious and gracious Asantehene has come back home. And we instantaneously accorded him the title. In his absence, my ancestors from the Botase royal line, Mambo, virtually, the colonial British installed us to hold up a lot of the positions, which I'm happy now to realize my great ancestors never illegally decided to take over those positions. They insisted they were mere caretakers, though never confided to the British. And when our illustrious uncles returned, he graciously handed over Bantuma, Limit, all the stools that we were looking after. Anana has come back home. He was to determine what is to happen to those stools and what not. And I'm happy, as one of the ancestors now, that the role that Mampong Botase Roy has played can never be constituted nor classified as rebellious. And it is in the same vein that I am here. You are all occupant of the silver stool, graciously serving you, sir, my majesty. These objects of the Anglo-Asante Wars, particularly those of 1874, are finally come home. 100 years ago, your grandfather, to my brother the first, made that ultimate sacrifice to save Asante. That is what I elaborated upon. From total destruction, so that you and I today, as the descendants of that royalty, are still alive, and we still display our love and affection for the kingdom and culture of Asante. Homecoming is what it is, and a new cultural cooperation among people is what we have begun talking about for some time now. But we are here also to witness the launch of two very important books by historians of two separate generations. Incidentally, Professor MacLeod, just now we were having some conversation, recollecting how the two of us, when you mandated me and sent me just 2 days notice, hey, let's say Manhyia, here is the ticket, first class, board the plane, go over to Dallas, Texas, to represent me, to read my keynote address, because at that time Dallas Museum of Arts was organizing a program dubbed Dallas Exhibition, The Power of Gold, Asante Royal Regalia, from Ghana, organized by the Dallas Museum of Arts in April 15th to August 12, 2018. And it was there that I met my cloud professor. And I must confess, as soon as I detected that he literally, quote unquote, can be classified and called as one of the founding fathers of the great museum of Otumfuo, behind us over here. Please, let's give him a hand. He is here today on the platform. And I'll take it from the agenda, but I'll leave it to our illustrious MC to highlight about it. You are all welcome to this great event. Once again, my gracious Majesty, I have dutifully declared today's meeting open. Thank you, sir.
Another round of applause for our distinguished chairman of this great occasion, the Manhyia of Mampong traditional area. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, once again, let's welcome Dr. Chris Gosden. It's also a heartwarming to have the director of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, Dr. Tristram Hunt, representing one of the world's leading museum of decorative arts. We thank you so much for being here with us. We have an 8-member team of British Airways, led by the head of sales, South Asia, Middle East, and Africa, Mr. Moran Biga. The IAG Cargo, which serve as the official logistic partner, has a team of 8 members, led by the regional manager, Mr. Charles Ajay. Mr. Charles Ajay, we thank you, we appreciate your global services and your presence here. We are also grateful to Constantine Logistics in the UK and the West Wing Logistics in Accra. It's again with pride that we welcome the head of UNESCO in Ghana, Mr. Edmond Bukala, with his wife, Mrs. Bukala. We understand that this is the first time Mr. Bukala is visiting Kumasi since he assumed office. Mr. Bukala, stay a little longer. 2 very important books to be officially launched, and we'd like to appreciate the presence of the publishers of the Ghanaian edition, Mr. and Mrs. Fred Labi, also here with us. We thank you so much. Your Majesty, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Director General of NADMO, Honorable Eric Nana Ajiman Prempe. And of course, your son, Professor Adem Mensah, the CEO of Kofanochi Teaching Hospital. I now welcome the member of the Board of Trustees of the British Museum, Dr. Chris Gosden, for a quick statement. Shall we put our hands together once again for Dr. Gosden?
Distinguished guests, Your Royal Majesty, please accept my congratulations on behalf of the British Museum on this auspicious occasion of your Silver Jubilee. Thank you for hosting me and my colleague Julie Hudson and for welcoming us in such a friendly and open manner. It is my privilege to say a few words about the loan from the British Museum to the homecoming exhibition, as well as to briefly speak about future partnerships and future collaborations. We were delighted to receive Your Royal Majesty at the British Museum last year, and I know my colleagues were very grateful for your visit. The relationship and connection between the Golden Stool of Ashanti and the British Museum is now over 200 years old. In 1817, the British diplomat Thomas Bowditch was similarly privileged to have been hosted here in Kumasi by the illustrious forebear of Your Royal Majesty, the Asantehene Osai Bonsu, who gave generous gifts to the British Museum. All of us here know well that the history of our nations has also involved conflict, with the warfare between the British Empire and the Ashanti Kingdom, which started in 1873 and 4, a painful historical episode, and one which significantly changed the course of history for the Ashanti Kingdom. Many of the collections on display in this new exhibition directly relate to that painful historical chapter. The British Museum is firmly committed to building productive and forward-looking relationships using these collections today. We thank Your Royal Majesty for his wisdom and leadership in fostering this strong partnership. We were delighted that the visit of Your Royal Majesty to the British Museum last year was the catalyst for signing a new memorandum of understanding between the Golden Stool and the British Museum. The MOU and the Manhyia Palace Museum itself reflects 50 years of collaboration and partnership. In 1974, Asantehene Apokawari II requested the repatriation of Ashanti gold from the British Museum. Malcolm MacLeod, then Keeper of Ethnography, came to Kumasi to explain that the provisions of the British Museum Act prevented the permanent removal of the objects from the collection. He stated that the British Museum wished to cooperate with the Golden Stool in exploring mutual areas for future research in scholarship, including a major exhibition on the Ashanti and developing a museum at the Manhyia Palace with training for museum staff. The Palace Museum we see today is the tangible result of our joint initiatives. We have come a long way in 50 years. Notable amongst these objects is the Mupoponsuo sword, traditionally used by Ashanti kings to swear their allegiance to the Golden Stool. Amongst the objects selected is also a small gold ornament in the form of a lute harp. This ornament was one of the cast gold objects presented in 1817 to the British diplomat Thomas Bowditch during his visit to Kumasi by the Asantehene Osibonsu. According to Bowditch, they were intended by the Asantehene as gifts to the British Museum and serve as means of representing the wealth of the Ashanti Kingdom in London. We're looking forward to learning more about these objects from colleagues and members of the public in Kumasi as we continue our collaboration. As a museum, we are committed to widening access to all our collections, whether this is through our work back in London, online to global audiences, or by sharing the collection as loans, such as this one, to create new opportunities for engagement and understanding. The British Museum recognises the importance of these objects to Ashanti people, and since the 1970s there have been calls for them to return to Ghana. Their display enables people of Ghana to directly engage with these objects and their history in a new and important way that has not been possible before. We at the British Museum are wholly committed to continuing this relationship, building on this loan in a manner based on friendship, trust, mutual respect and a willingness to discuss. In this respect, I am delighted that during his visit to the UK in the summer, Your Royal Majesty will give a lecture at the British Museum focusing on Ashanti culture and heritage. The lecture will be introduced by the eminent writer and philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah. It leaves me only to reiterate to you, Your Royal Majesty, our heartfelt congratulations on your Silver Jubilee, to thank you again for working in partnership with us and for inviting me here today. Thank you.
Therefore, Dr. Tristram Hart.
His Royal Majesty Otumfo and Nanamu Memamo Asia. Eye me ani jisye meka and then ye Etumadi Noho. Mede Intia IF UNESCO Obremo. Se Africanino eye nidi bere niina se epeisha nanamo aemfo ne ade asheman awasheshe Africa abakisem. Esteemed authors, Professor Malcolm MacLeod and Ivor Ageman Adwa, dear members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, the media, ladies and gentlemen, I congratulate His Royal Majesty Antufo Osei Tututu for supporting the bold initiative to have the exhibition Homecoming Adversity and Commemoration and launch of 2 books, Images of Ghana by Prof. Malcolm MacLeod and An History of Manhyia Palace Museum by Ivor Ageman Adwa. His Royal Majesty Atumfo, standing here in this place rich with history, marked with time, of the great civilizations of Africa, standing here in your presence as a testimony of the royal kingdoms that ruled and reigned in this great continent of Africa, only compares to us as representing the only institution in the United Nations organization that deals with culture and history, and dealing with the history of Africa. We acknowledge how important this 25th Silver Jubilee that we have celebrating today means in the hearts and minds of young people, especially for the present generation in regard to the future. You are a testimony of what Africa used to be before slave trade and slavery. It was great kingdoms that surpasses many empires that were known in that time. And so for us, especially for the younger generation, while looking into the future, we are inspired, but not only knowing what was Africa before then, but also you are a testimony of that great past and also an inspiration of the great future of what we all aspire to. So these books that tackle the issue of the complex nature of restitution in international global system and intellectual encounters between Asantehene, Osei Bosun, and British trader negotiator between and the implication of culture thereafter, as well as museum in Asante in the last 200 years respectively. I commend the 2 authors, as the chairperson of the moderator also highlighted, for throwing more light on Africa culture, history, and heritage. This is in line with the UNESCO General History of Africa project, which encouraging the narration of Africa history from an Afrocentric context that shows the contribution of Africa to global development and civilization. The refusal to recognize Africa as the possibility of creating original cultures poses itself as a challenge that only renunciation of prejudice and the renewal of method could have made possible to overcome. In the recent past, world history presented Africa only from the encounter of the continent with Europe, making this history appear as an appendix to European history. His Royal Majesty Antufo Osei Tutu, ladies and gentlemen, if after having conquered the land, the power and the labor force, the colonial system has resolutely worked to reconvert consciences and mentalities and to win them over its cause through school, education, language, the mode of life, administration, and the army, as quoted by George Harley, called the moral conquest. It is because he knew that the strongest is never strong, enough until he has reigned over minds, cultures, and consciences. Colonization was above all a subtle but significant and systematic enterprise of cultural alienation. In the implementation of this vast design, the role played in history, science, education, and culture was decisive. His Royal Majesty Otumfuo Osei-Tutu. This is why, as long as African history and education system have not been stripped down, rid of all the falsifications, distortions, and tendentious interpretation that they contain, it will never be able to reinvest in a new strategic vision and a chosen approach that required for its development and to achieve its optimal effectiveness. Because we can only truly love what we know well. The commitment and motivation of African civilization in favor of their continent and their conscious solidarity with the other people who compose them undoubtedly depend on the positive perception that they have of their past, the value and relevance of their culture, of which history and language constitute the basis and substance. It follows from the above that for Africa to repossess themselves, as the former Director General of UNESCO said, Mr. Federico Mayor, occupy its place, it claims, in the current millennium, African civilization must, without further ado, reconstitute their civilizational heritage. That's exactly, Your Highness, you're doing. In all its authenticity, revisit it, make it discovered, make it known and loved, because it represents not only their irreplaceable contribution to the heritage of the universal, but also above all, it is the nourishing sap from which the elites and all social strata must drink if they want to find the best answer to the challenges of the present and those of the future, on one hand, and on the other hand, the strength, vitality, and confidence necessary to participate in debates where the destiny of the world are sealed, as once said by Chekontadio Professor. His Royal Majesty Otumfuo Osei-Tutu. Ladies and gentlemen, UNESCO clearly states that the return and restitution of cultural properties is central to the 1970 Convention, and its duty is not only to remember, but to fundamentally safeguard the identity of peoples and to promote peaceful society whereby the spirit of solidarity will be strengthened. Thus, the 1970 Convention aligns with the Sustainable Development Goal defined by the United Nations 2030 Development Agenda. There are more to be identified and returned, as my predecessor have spoken, and return to Ghana and continue to push for their return. We may also look at and resolve internal challenges around cultural property taken during local wars or conflicts. I commend Ghana for its effort in championing the return, reparations, and restitution agenda for Africa and its diaspora. These cultural properties are more than just objects. They go to the heart of the identity of the community they were taken from. I hope the return of the current cultural property will encourage the Ghana Football team to pursue their objectives with renewed vigor, urgency to come up with a roadmap involving stakeholders such as customs, the police, artists, the civil societies, traditional authorities, academia, students, media, and the general public, but above all, under His Royalness guarding eyes. His Royal Majesty Otumfuo Osei-Tutu and his team, again, for organizing this historical set of events. And Your Majesty, you can count on UNESCO. And I will make personal commitment that my stay in this blessed country will be to ensure that cultural development and social cohesion under your guiding eyes will meet successful endeavor in the years to come. Medase. Thank you.
Mr. Bokala, I told you should stay a little longer here in Kumasi, because if you stay here for 2 weeks, you will not deliver your speech in English again. Yeah, that's it. Mr. Edmond Bokala. We have 2 important events today, the book launch and the exhibition. And you have the privilege of getting the book and at the same time entering the first time for so many years the Manhyia Palace Museum. We're so celebrating the 25th anniversary of His Majesty Otumfuo Osei Tutu II. I'd now like to invite the regional manager of IAG Cargo, Mr. Charles Ajay, to give us a short remarks. Round of applause for Mr. Ajay. The presence of the Vice Chancellor of the Apiaminka University, Professor Frederick Kweku Ajay. We thank you so much for being here. Now to invite the author of the Images of Ghana, Professor Malcolm McLeod, to give us a brief remark of his book. Round of applause for Professor McLeod.
Otumfuo, Nananom, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be here today, and I bring congratulations to Otumfuo on his Silver Jubilee from my university in Scotland, Glasgow University, of which Otumfuo is an honorary graduate. I have been asked to say a few words about the book Images of Ghana. It was a great honor for me to be invited to give the Balfour Memorial Lectures just before COVID at KNUST. The fact that the book exists at all is entirely due to Ivor Ajamandrea, who took the typescript and turned them into a book. I am very grateful to him. Thank you, Ivor. There are 3 parts to the book. The first deals with how the Asante have been depicted in exhibitions, reconstructions, and events since the 1880s. One key event was the creation by Robert Rattray of an Asante village at the Great Empire Exhibition at Wembley in 1924 and 1925. The village became the home to a number of Asante, and millions of people saw them and saw that exhibition. Another major exhibition was Asante Kingdom of Gold at the British Museum and subsequently in New York. More recently, there was a major exhibition, as you will have heard, at the Dallas Museum of Art, opened by the Manhyia, and Otumfuo wrote an introduction to the book that accompanied that exhibition. There have been in many parts of the world many other exhibitions about Asante. The sad thing, the terrible thing, is they were all organized by outsiders. I hope that the next one will be created by Asante scholars. The third section of the book deals with future developments in museums. Some of the things I suggested then are already occurring. For example, museums are scanning objects in their collections and sending the computer code to people outside the museum in any part of the world who have access to a 3-dimensional printer. Those people can use the code to make a replica of the museum object. This will open up museums in unprecedented ways. The middle section of the book deals with the contentious and complex matter of restitution. When I wrote it, I could not have imagined that we would be here today celebrating the homecoming of material looted in the 19th century. These things have come back because of the initiative, the persistence, and the diplomacy of the Tumfo. But as you have heard, the relationship between the British Museum and Asantehene goes back a long way. In 1974, Asantehene Okowari II wrote to the British Museum asking for the return of material taken away in the Sakaranti War. I came to Kumasi and explained that due to the laws which govern the activity of the British Museum, permanent removal of items from the collection is not possible. But the British Museum wanted to work in any ways open to it to form a constructive relationship with the Golden Stone.
He's an academic, indeed he's an editor and a former director. He's a policy analyst and a true son of the Manhyia Palace. Indeed, he is the author of the history of the Manhyia Palace. Help me welcome Mr. Ivor Ajibandia.
Otumfo, some years ago, I used to have regular conversations with your uncle, Berima Kofi Kakari, under the now shaded appeasement shrine in front of the Queen Mother's Palace. He will be reading the daily newspapers and sometimes historical literature in a low-stretch, armless chair. Politics will always be on the table as he found comradeship in Karl Marx and the Convention's People's Party. On some occasions, he tutored me on the lineage history of Asante, of which he was a Grand Master. He consistently advised me to emulate the family services of my past. One day, he asked me whether I had met you. I responded that, like many other people, I had only heard of you. At that time, you bore the title of Berima, or a duke. He went on to proverbially tell me that your time will come. I will look for him when I return, I told Nana Kakari during this short conversation, as I was traveling to Accra to travel to the United States for graduate studies. I had only come to the palace because your brother, Okowari II, had invited me to see him before my departure, and I had seized the opportunity to pay Nana Kakari a short visit. By the time I returned, there was a new order. You were the king of Asante. I had come to the palace again and seen you coming from your mother's quarters. That was the first encounter. When I approached and introduced myself to you, you were very welcoming and also said I should emulate my family, and in particular, my father. All along, I thought I knew my family, and my family knew me. But that was not the point. The constant reference was in its own order. I later on looked deeper into that family, and the result was what partly influenced the writing of this book. It goes as far back as the references went. My great-great-grandfather, Wachi Yamkuma, the father of Asantehene Apenyi, was the Manhyia of Kumasi. Then there was, in the same lineage, the Champontia, who was for years the Asantehene's envoy to Dagomba. That was a period of cordial trade and strategic military relations between Asante and Dagomba.
President Kufuor might have capitalized on this and concluded that he would be the best mediator in the crisis that eventually followed over a century after. Echampontia's son, Kwame Boateng, who had been born in 1845, was the Chidomhene of Kumasi and my great-grandfather. He was part of the delegation that went to London in 1895 to negotiate new relations with Britain, and in particular, the House of Commons. That meeting, or that mission, was in London when the colonial secretary, Joseph Chamberlain, who the director of the the Victoria and Albert Museum with us now, and in his book, Building Jerusalem, the rise and fall of the Victorian city, describes as an arch-imperialist. He ordered the invasion of Kumasi. Boateng was among the 54 chiefs and royals who were afterwards exiled to the Seychelles, where many eventually died. His sons, the Boateng brothers, who were my paternal grandfathers, returned to Kumasi after their studies in England. Two of them, Henry and Paul, became secretaries to Asantehene Prempeh II and Asantehene Opokuwari II. In the 1950s, when your uncle, Prempeh II, desired to have an emblem, Paul and his brother Thomas Boateng, who was at the University of Durham, adopted the Demchemche and the Krobuche as concept designs. The originals of these had been created by the royal artisans before the reign of Asantehene Kofi Takari in the 1860s. It was through the technical services of the Royal Mint in London that Paul and Thomas Boateng had a design made so that the Royal Court of Asante will have its own emblem or insignia, which is today the palace's identity mark. The original Demchemche and Krobuche are among the 15 regalia that were returned and which you immediately acknowledged from the British Museum and presented to you 3 weeks ago on April 12 at 1:30 p.m. They are part of the opening exhibition today. These historical encounters were what Nana Kakari wanted their reimagination of. You shortly after that meeting with you gave me responsibilities, a historical mission to the Seychelles to meet the president and through your leadership ensure that all the documents relating to the exile of Prempeh I at the Seychelles National Archives were brought to you at this palace. That the descendants and grandchildren of Prempeh I, and thus your own, on the main island of Manhyia, will visit Kumasi after you visited the island amongst us. Thank you.
Your Majesty, I forgot to add that Mr. Ivo Manhyia is also a poet.
Your Majesty and distinguished guests, it's a great privilege to be asked to review Iva Jamandir's book, A History of Manhyia Palace Museum, Inaugural and Other Objects. This book tackles Asante art history and how this intersects with the history of the making, decline, and remaking of the Asante Empire itself, with glimpses of the psychology of Asante kings and queen mothers, I should add, who directed these events. By focusing on the inaugural objects we'll see at the museum today, the book also introduces us to the politics of restitution. Manhyia observes, and I quote, "If the initial idea of reparation was more about compensation for what was taken from Africa, particularly the human capital through slavery, restitution, and what became restitution objects were the visible and tangible materials which can rightfully be returned to their owners, end quote. The book runs to 224 pages with 9 chapters, including an introduction and epilogue, and over 50 images. I have 10 minutes to present my review, so I can only give you a quick tour, present highlights, and make a case for why this book is important in this historical moment. I want to focus on 3 cross-cutting themes that run through the chapters and help a reader to understand these wider issues around art, empires, and restitution. The first theme is Asante art itself. Who produces it? How is it produced? Who owns it? What functions it serves for royals and lay people, and for friends and adversaries of Asante. Through images and text, we see several art objects: wooden stools, gold busts, velvet umbrellas, silk textiles, medical instruments, paintings, proverbs, and poetry. We see the artists who produced them, the Jumfor, designers of royal regalia based at Manhyia Palace, who train as apprentices before becoming masters. The artists in famous villages like Bonre and Pankrono, who produce Kete and Edinkra. Commercial gold, silver, and brass smiths. Contemporary artists who paint portraits and sculpt busts and effigies of kings and queen mothers. And also, foreign artists commissioned to capture Asante royal life and village life in real time for foreign consumption. We see how the structure and functions of the arts change over time through cultural exchanges and strategic borrowings. We see the long history of a museum idea by Asante royals. In the 1770s, the 4th Asantehene Osekwejo was interested in building, to quote Ajimandia, an elegant or extravagant palace to be adorned with gold and keep treasures. He built the Breman village, about 5 miles from Kumasi, and a mausoleum with galleries, the architecture of which he supervised, and which has since become the resting place of Asante kings. His successor, Asantehene Osebunsu, pursued this vision and built the Aban, literally meaning government, in 1822. The Aban was described as a museum where the art treasures of the monarchy were stored, or a place of culture, or a storage space for the many gifts bestowed to royals from foreign places. In the 1950s, when the Asante Cultural Center was established, the Prempeh Second Jubilee Museum became a centerpiece in this space. This is where objects were sent to before the Manhyia Museum, Palace Museum was inaugurated in 1995. These iterations of the Royal Museum have functioned to house works of royal art. But the museum has also existed outside 4 walls, its objects weaving through social events like Durbas and festivals. To quote Ajimandia again, it is easier to see some of these objects during festivals like Ukudai, Akwesidai, Adai Kese, and even the rare ones like Ujura.
Another round of applause for Professor Ahmad Graham Akins.
History in the making. We're still celebrating the 25th anniversary of His Majesty Otofo Osei II, Monday, the season. And the grand debate will be on the 12th of May at Jabrim. Nana Lovelace Prempeh. Put your hands together for Nana Lovelace Prempeh. Nana Lovelace Prempeh has been a very true son of the Manhyia Palace. He's been involved and almost all the events happening here at Manhyia, and both locally and internationally. And I thank you for picking up the first one. We're talking about the history of Manhyia Palace Museum and the images of Ghana. This is a homecoming celebration, an exhibition, adversity, and commemoration. Thank you so much. Now you will have a gracious handshake with the celebrants. A big round of applause, please. We now invite Otufo Manhyia, who also doubled as a chairman of the Otufo Osei the Second Foundation, Nana Professor Ohineba Boachi Ajayi Wahine the Second. A round of applause, please. Emeritus Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, and he is the board chair of Otufo Osei the Second Foundation, Otufo Manhyia, Ohineba Boachi Ajayi Wahine the Second. Thank you so much, Dada. Now the third on the list is the Manhyia or Sampa traditional area, Nana Sangba Jamfla the Second. A round of applause. He traveled all the way from German North in the Bono region, and he is the Manhyia of Sampa traditional area, Nana Sangba Jamfla the Second, majestically walking to pick up the book in honor of His Majesty Otufo Osei the Second. Nana, the people of Sampa are so grateful for your loyalty to Asantehene. We thank you so much. Long miles away from German North in the Bono region to give us the grace and the loyalty to the Asante Kingdom. Next on the list is another true son of Manhyia Palace. And he has been working around, very hardworking, smart, confident, and intelligent engineer Nana Poku Ajiman. A round of applause for engineer Nana Poku Ajiman. I recall when we met at the Kwara University of Science and Technology for Otufo Composers competition. He donated 40,000 Ghana cedis to the winners, who eventually came all the way from Tamale. Thank you, Nana. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your loyalty. Engineer Nana Poku Ajiman, thank you. He's also a member of the planning committee. Next, to pick up a book, the former MP for Obuasi, Honorable Edwin Inin. A round of applause for the former Member of Parliament, Honorable Edwin Inin. Now we call on the Director General of NADMO, the MPP parliamentary candidate for Tepa, Honorable Eric Nana Ajiman Prembe. The Director General of NADMO, Your Majesty, he whispered into my ear that on the 12th of May, Honorable Dr. Joseph Kwam is also a former member of Parliament. Professor Kwam has been a publisher, he's an educationist, a former member of Parliament, and the proud son of Asantehene, Honorable Dr. Joseph Kwam.
Trustees of the British Museum, Dr. Chris Costin, Director of the Victoria and Albert Museum, Dr. Christian Hunt, Representative of UNESCO, Mr. Edmund Mukala, Professor McLeod, and Ms. Julie Hudson, members of the press, diplomatic corps, and unknown pre-mothers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I have the singular honor to conclude this part of the program before His Majesty Otumfuo officially opens the exhibition and gives an address to us. We have learned a great deal today from the various speakers and experts who, as well as the two amazing books we just launched. To know more about the images of Ghana and the history of Manhyia Palace Museum, I urge you all to get your copies. In the coming moments and days to follow, starting Friday, we will be reliving the experience of Thomas Butteridge in 1817, who as a trade negotiator in Kumasi, met Asantehene and Nana Osei-Bonsu to construct a gold trading port, and in the process became mesmerized by the flourishing market and the exceptional goldsmithing techniques of the Asante artisans. He was blown away by their ingenuity. When Butteridge wrote about the looted regalia in his 1819 book, The Mission from Cape Coast to Ashanti, many in Britain doubted the authenticity of his findings. It became obvious years later that it was not a fantasy. They are real Asante-made works of ingenuity, made with no power tools, pneumatic air drills, or sophisticated instruments. 1874 was a sorrowful year of adversity when Asante reluctantly fought a war with the British and lost so many souls, and on top of that, many of our treasured artifacts. We have made the impossible possible. And much thanks and appreciation also go to the British Museum, Victoria and Albert Museum, for this memorable day. On the 8th of February this year, the Fowler Museum at the University of California, Los Angeles, permanently returned 7 precious objects to His Royal Majesty Otumfuo II during the Sagrenti Kuntunkuni Derby held on this palace grounds. As we celebrate our Majesty's Silver Jubilee and the 150-year anniversary of the Sagrenti War, let us rejoice that today we shall set our eyes on what we lost, but is now with us. The renewed spirit of Anglo-Asante cultural cooperation will carry us through the negotiation process. Until then, let's enjoy the exhibition. God bless you, our King. God bless Asantehene. God bless our homeland. Otumfuo Wonkwaso, Asantehene Wonkwaso.
The new, refurbished, elevated Manhyia Palace Museum.
Oh, please.
Samahene, Dominatine, Asantehene, Julie Hudson of the British Museum, Director of the Victoria and Albert Museum, Dr. Christian Hunt, Angus Peterson of the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Deputy British Commissioner, the Head of UNESCO, Mr. Edmund Mukala, and the wife, Mrs. Mukala, the Head of Sales, South Asia, Middle East, and
Africa of British Airways. This is historic. The recommissioning of the Manhyia Palace Museum by His Majesty Otofo Osei-Tutu II as part of Atumi's market, the 25th anniversary of his goodness. We shall all be waiting for the gracious speech of His Majesty after the tour.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this building where I share these talks with you this afternoon will be 100 years next year. Though originally built as a residential palace for my grand-uncle Grandpa the First in 1925, it was turned into a museum by my brother II, memory of the adversities and sacrifices that Grandpa the First endured with those around him, divisional and sub-divisional chiefs, courtiers, some of whom lost their lives in Kumasi and across the Indian Ocean and the Seychelles Islands. There are two emotional photos in the exhibition of his initial journey to the coast with hundreds of Asantes who said they would not let him travel alone to exile. This exhibition The first museum was established nearly 30 years ago as part of the terms of negotiations with the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Zero.
I'm therefore very happy to see Dr. Chris Gosden and Dr. Tristram Hunt, who promised they would come when all have been cleared and the others are home with us.
Zero.
I'm so happy to hear the MOU signed with the British Museum Company on technical support, and especially conservation models of the objects has begun.
Zero.
And the tools for this have been secured.
Zero.
And out of this, a visiting curatorship has also been agreed upon.
Zero.
We have just heard what some of the partners have to say in the backing of multilateral institutions such as UNESCO. We have also heard from two people appointed to handle the negotiation issues, Professor Malcolm McLeod, whose book, Images of Ghana and Ivor Manhyia's A History of Manhyia has been launched in additional specific literature of museology in Asante in the last 200 years.
Zero.
We all accept that there are universal values of culture which attract people from different ethnic groups, nationalities and beliefs. The reactions of these objects becoming home were ample evidence of this. But we must also realize that cultural changes and bereavement are part of human nature, and to that extent, contemporary artistic creations cannot escape from these human preferences, sometimes also generational.
Zero.
Previously, many art historians discarded the idea of African art, yet the black race came with its own forms, whether from Southern Africa or the eastern side of the continent.
Zero.
That denial was not surprising under the implantation of external culture. What was also not surprising was again the denial that art markets and auction houses existed in parts of Africa, including Asante in the 1800s.
Zero.
If these have been proved wrong with research and scholarship including art histories of the continent now taught in universities, home and abroad, there is a current challenge we also need to look at. Most of the returned objects in this exhibition were made by Asante Royal artisans or the group we call Uniform, who still practice their trade and have been doing so since Asante was founded. Many are resident artists. It took time before they were licensed to go commercial into the open markets.
Zero.
Now the world is an open place and trade and business knows no boundaries. It's a market that determines many of the choices we make and the things we buy. If there's freedom from royal artisans to be liberal from palace impositions and participation in the open markets, it brings some personal wealth or income for families and should absolutely be encouraged.
Zero.
There is a reverse side that could be worrying. Markets are markets, and those who invest in African art these days do so and trade in future.
Zero.
There are many galleries springing up in modern African cities, and there are reviews of contemporary African art in major media that include CNN, Bloomsbury, CBS, SABC, of young African artists who have graduated from art schools within the continent and abroad.
Zero.
Many of their products are sadly not in African galleries for sale and are easily bought by non-Africans with interest in them or to be branded and marketed for bigger profits.
Zero.
It's the markets. What can we do to save some of the creative energies of especially contemporary artists? In some of the exhibition, objects were taken forcibly at war and sometimes at peace. The ones that are being produced and brought from Africa today are at the dictates of the markets.
Zero.
From the LC Palace in France to homes of prime ministers of Europe and middle and upper class individuals. These artworks are precious objects that will be worth millions in the future. For many Africans, have to travel to see these in future. I asked the Manhyia Valley Museum to design a project to support traditional art in Ghana. We'll be collaborating with the NUST College of Art and some of our partners, including the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the British Airways, and IAG Cargo to support this. In 10 years from 2025, it will institute 3 prizes a year for traditional finance. The works of major finalists will not only be purchased for the upcoming contemporary art museum, so we will help retain some of the creative art products in this country. When I next travel to England in the coming months, I'm told it's in July, I'll be meeting some of these Ghanaian artists, painters, goldsmiths, and see how we can collectively, working with some of the royal or traditional art groups, do this. When the modalities are set up, we will also work with private galleries in the country to at least retain some of the productions. It is not always that we have to solicit for things we can strive and do for ourselves. I hope that over the days and the months ahead, we will find comfort and be inspired by some of the creativities of our forebears. The exhibition that we are witnessing today has been through negotiations from my predecessors, where Prime First, when he returned, requested for these artifacts to be brought back. Prime II, my uncle, also brought that idea in 1948. My brother, Tukokokore, also came up with this idea again, and then I come here now standing in front of you to also negotiate. And in May, when I traveled, I brought the matter up again with the British Museum, and through that meeting, here we are with all these items being returned to us. We thank them very much. It is not the end. I know we still have so much to do, but this is the first phase of it. The agreement is for us to keep it for 3 years and then renew it for another 3 years. Interestingly, people are arguing that but these things are for us, so why are they going into us? Unfortunately, there's a law in Britain, law of antiquity, which even doesn't allow them to move these items out of the country. For the sake that they believed in us, and that we went in for negotiations and were able to convince them that we would display that for our people to also see it. The items that came back, virtually the soul of the people of Ashanti. We are displaying this for you to see that the items that were stolen, looted, in 1874, not all of them are returned, but that what we have here still embodies the soul of Ashanti. And I believe within the period that they are being displayed here, you make it for everybody to come and visit, to see it yourselves, to believe that yes, we have this. Yes, things were created by our own artisans. Yes, we ask ourselves, are we able to do that in this modern day? In those days, in 1874 and early on, if we are artisans who have not been to universities being able to create this, why can't we do this now? So that is also a challenge to our students, that's a challenge to our young people and all that, to be able to be creative enough to be able to design these items. So the spirit is back here. Everybody should please visit. The Gonzo sword is there, the Jimja is there, everything up there are all being displayed for you to see that yes, as we said, when they ransacked it, yes, it was true. Yes, they are still keeping our artifacts, but we also are happy that they agreed to return some of these to us for display for our people to see. So thank you. Let us accept that today is a day for Ashanti, it's a day for the Black African continent, that the spirit that we go and share is back with us again today. Thank you very much.
His Majesty will lead the delegation to the exhibition hall. And afterwards, His Majesty will, until you will call upon, to be seated for the lunch
at the Jubilee Hall.